What if the quiet corner store on the edge of your block was laundering money for a criminal empire? What if the friendly local politician shaking hands at parades was secretly on the payroll of a shadowy organization? In Newark, New Jersey, these weren't just hypotheticals. They were reality. Welcome back to CRIMEBOT Chronicles, where we uncover the darkest corners of the criminal underworld. Today, we're diving into the chilling enigma that is the Newark Crime Syndicate. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment, because the story you're about to hear is as real as it is terrifying. Let's start with a disturbing fact. In the 1970s and 80s, federal investigations revealed that nearly 1 in 5 major public contracts in Newark had direct ties to organized crime. Think about that: schools, roads, hospitals, all potentially touched by the greasy fingers of the underworld. So what secrets did the Newark Crime Syndicate hide? And why were they so hard to expose? The Newark Crime Syndicate wasn't a single family, but a tangled network of mafia operatives, corrupt officials, and willing accomplices. Think of it as a virus, not just infecting a single organ, but spreading silently through the entire body of the city. Rooted in the Italian-American mafia and closely allied with the Genovese crime family, the Newark crew carved out their empire through the usual methods: extortion, racketeering, loan sharking, and contract rigging. But their success wasn't just about muscle. It was about manipulation. They didn't just force people into silence. They made them believe silence was in their best interest. At the center of it all was Ralph Capodanno, a name whispered in the back rooms of bars, mentioned only in fear. On the surface, he was a community figure, generous with donations, always present at fundraisers. But underneath that polished image was a man whose cold strategy and brutal efficiency helped create a criminal machine so deeply embedded in Newark's daily life, it became almost invisible. Capodanno had a motto: no noise, no heat. That meant violence only when necessary, and silence as currency. His operations were run like businesses: controlled, efficient, profitable, and above all, hidden. But it wasn't just Ralph. The real power behind the Newark Syndicate wasn't a man, it was a system. One of the most secretive components was a council known as the Commission. This shadowy body was a coalition of high-ranking mobsters from different regions, including Newark, New York, and Philadelphia. They weren't just making decisions about who owed money or which nightclub needed a new owner. They were deciding who lived and who disappeared. The commission met irregularly, usually in secluded mansions or hidden rooms above restaurants. Their discussions were never recorded, and attendance was always enforced by loyalty and fear. Their reach was enormous. Through a combination of bribes, blackmail, and calculated threats, they controlled judges, police captains, and city contractors. They didn't just dodge the law, they rewrote it from behind the scenes. To the public, the Newark Crime Syndicate had an almost mythical quality. Some saw them as protectors, keeping out worse criminal elements. Others feared them, knowing what happened to those who got too curious. But most just tried to keep their heads down. Because in Newark, asking the wrong questions could get you a visit in the middle of the night, and no one ever heard from you again. For law enforcement, the challenge was immense. Agents and officers often described it like trying to punch a ghost. The syndicate had layers of insulation, front men, false identities, and businesses used as shields. One FBI agent who worked undercover in the 1980s said, "You could have breakfast at a diner run by them, get gas at a station run by them, then go to a city meeting chaired by someone they owned, and never know you were knee-deep in their world." And then there was the psychological warfare. The syndicate didn't just use violence. They used intimidation that fed on the imagination. Anonymous notes left in lockers, untraceable phone calls with vague threats, cars trailing family members. No direct threat, just enough to let you know they were watching. Always watching. For some, the stress was unbearable. In 1979, a Newark police detective named Salvatore Massey was found dead in his apartment, officially ruled a suicide. But his widow insisted that he had been receiving threats after poking around too deeply into a string of arsons tied to mob-linked insurance fraud. No charges were ever filed. By the 1980s, the Newark Crime Syndicate had grown bold. Too bold. Their network extended into New York and even reached as far as Miami and Chicago. But they didn't count on the racketeering laws passed in the late 70s, known as RICO. These laws allowed prosecutors to go after the entire organization instead of just individual crimes. And then came 1985. It started with a man named Peter Ganci, a high-ranking mob associate with ties to waste management, real estate, and local unions. Ganci's arrest was supposed to be just another raid. But inside his office, agents found something they weren't expecting: detailed ledgers, secret codes, and names, lots of names. Ganci had kept records. Not because he was careless, but because he thought he was untouchable. He believed his protection ran too deep. He was wrong. Those documents cracked open the entire operation. For the first time, federal agents could see the full architecture of the Newark Crime Syndicate: who answered to whom, where the money flowed, and who was helping them stay invisible. It was like peeling back the walls of a house only to find rot in every beam. But the most shocking part wasn't just the crime, it was the collusion. The documents named a sitting city council member, 2 police lieutenants, a well-known real estate developer, and even a respected judge. Newark wasn't just infiltrated, it was owned. One agent who reviewed the evidence said, "It felt like a magic trick. You spend years chasing shadows, and suddenly the lights come on and the monster is standing right next to you, smiling." Public reaction was swift and chaotic. Protests erupted. Newspapers printed stories with blood-red headlines. For the first time, Newark citizens could no longer pretend that the corruption was just rumor or exaggeration. It was all too real. Psychologically, this shift was devastating for many. Citizens who had placed their faith in institutions now questioned everything. People who once viewed the mob as a distant threat realized they had been eating at the same restaurants, attending the same churches, sending their kids to the same schools. The fear morphed into paranoia. Some witnesses recanted testimony. Others disappeared entirely. One brave woman, Maria Benedetti, who ran a community youth center, testified against a known associate of Capodanno. Weeks later, her center was mysteriously burned down. Arson was suspected. No arrests were made. As the years wore on, the Newark Syndicate weakened, but it never fully vanished. Capodanno died in 1991 of natural causes, but many believe he knew his time was up and faded into silence before federal charges could land. Some of the associates who avoided prison retired quietly. Others rebranded, starting legitimate businesses and continuing to wield influence behind polished smiles and generous donations. Even today, whispers remain. Anonymous tips still flow into law enforcement. Journalists sometimes vanish from stories they were working on. Old buildings are mysteriously bought and renovated with untraceable funds. The ghosts of Newark's crime syndicate may have left the spotlight, but they never really left. Why does this story matter? Because it shows how power, when unchecked, can warp a city. Because it reminds us that silence and fear can be more dangerous than bullets. And because the story of the Newark Crime Syndicate isn't just about the past, it's a warning for the present. Look around your own city. Ask yourself, who's really in charge? If this story sent chills down your spine, or made you look at your surroundings just a little differently, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the Newark Crime Syndicate, or any organized crime stories you think deserve a deeper dive. And if you're hungry for more chilling tales, check out our breakdown of the 5 families of New York. It's a ride through betrayal, power, and the true meaning of organized chaos. This has been CRIMEBOT Chronicles. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Because truth, no matter how dark, deserves a voice. Until next time, stay safe. Stay curious.